Hey there. If you've ever walked into a bookstore and seen that whole shelf just dedicated to Bibles, you've probably noticed something. There isn't just one, there are dozens. So why is that? And, does it really matter which one you pick up?
It's a totally fair question, right? You've got the King James Version, the NIV, the ESV. The list just goes on and on. It can be pretty overwhelming. And here's the thing. They all say they're faithful translations. But if you actually open them up side by side, you'll see they can read really, really differently. So what's the deal?
Well, today we're going to dive into that very question by looking at a text that makes a strong case for one specific version, the King James Bible. This source argues that the differences we see in modern translations aren't just, updating old words. It claims they actually change some really fundamental ideas. So we're going to walk through the specific examples it gives, comparing the King James, or the KJV, with some of the more modern Bibles out there.
Okay, so the first big area this source gets into is the path to salvation. How is it described? The argument here is that even some really subtle word changes can end up painting a totally different picture for the person reading it.
And the first key difference it points out is this. Is the path narrow, or is it hard? Now that might sound like splitting hairs, but according to this source, it has massive implications. Let's take a look at the verse it uses to make its point.
Okay, so here they are, side by side. The KJV in Matthew 7:14 says, "And narrow is the way which leadeth unto life." But if you look at the ESV, a really popular modern version, it says, "And the way is hard that leads to life."
So what's the big deal? Well, according to the source, the word narrow suggests there's only one specific path. But hard just describes the journey. It doesn't say anything about how many paths there are. The argument is that this one little word change shifts the whole focus from a singular way, Christ only, to just a difficult process. All right, let's keep going. The source builds on this idea with its next example. It asks, who exactly finds it difficult to get into the kingdom of God? Is it everyone? Or is it a specific group of people? And this comparison from Mark chapter 10 really shows what the source is getting at. See, in the KJV, it's very specific, how hard it is for them that trust in riches to enter. But look at the NIV. That whole condition is just gone. It's now a blanket statement, how hard it is to enter the kingdom of God. The argument is that this takes a very specific warning and applies it to everybody, making it a universal struggle. Now, this next point is a little different. It's not about changing a word, it's about removing a whole verse. The source points us to Acts chapter 8, verse 37. In the story, an Ethiopian man asks, "What's stopping me from being baptized?" In the KJV, Philip gives a very clear precondition. "If thou believest with all thine heart, thou mayest." But in versions like the ESV and the NIV, that verse is just gone. The question is asked, but the answer that's in the KJV isn't there. Okay, let's shift gears to the second big theme the source tackles, the state of being saved. Is it something that happens in a moment, a finished deal? Or is it more of a process, something you're always working towards? And check this out. The source points to passages like 1 Corinthians 1:18. The KJV says, "Unto us which are saved," that's past tense, done, but modern versions like the ESV and NIV translate it as "to us who are being saved," an ongoing process. The argument here is that just changing the verb tense completely shifts the idea from a certainty you have now to a process you're still in. And sticking with that same idea, the source then looks at spiritual growth. What's the point of it? What does it lead to? And again, the difference is pretty striking when you look at 1 Peter 2:2. The KJV says you grow thereby, meaning you grow because of the word. But the ESV says you grow up into salvation. The source claims this is a huge difference. In one, growth is what happens after you're saved. In the other, salvation is the thing you're trying to grow into. To really drive this home, the source uses a pretty powerful quote. It points out that the word saved only shows up once in the entire book of Revelation, in the KJV, and yet in modern versions that one instance has been omitted. Think about that for a second. Okay, so next, the source claims to have found a pattern. It argues that over and over again, when the KJV uses the word unbelief, modern translations swap it out for disobedience. And the theological implication, it says, is huge. It shifts the reason people can't enter God's rest from a lack of faith to a failure of works. And we're not talking about just one or two instances. The source lists 7 of them, in places like Hebrews, John, and Romans. In every single one, it says the same thing happens. Unbelief in the King James becomes disobedience in the new versions.
The conclusion drawn is that this is a systematic change, designed to shift the focus away from internal belief and onto external actions.
So, after walking us through all these examples, where does the source land? What's the final verdict? Well, it wraps things up with a very clear recommendation.
Basically, the text we've been looking at makes a very direct case. Stick with the King James Bible. And it gives 4 main reasons why. It claims the KJV comes from more reliable manuscripts, that its translators were unparalleled experts in ancient languages, that their translation technique was more accurate, and finally, that its theology is consistent from start to finish.